Hey everyone, it's time for another live look at the astrology. My name is Katie Sweetman, and this is your look at the astrology for December 2nd through 8th, 2024. So, believe it or not, we are at the end of the year, not quite. And while we do have one more month left of the 2024 of the year, we still have more time in the astrological year because the astrological year and the solar year, the calendar year, they're two different times. So here we are. It's not just December, it's a Sagittarius season, and we had a Sagittarius new moon just yesterday. And that means that not only, in this case, things do line up. We are in a new month, we are in a new lunar month. And over the next 4 weeks, we are living through the lens of Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a fire sign, something I probably talked about at length last week. It is a very different element than water, which was Scorpio season, which was the Scorpio lunar month period. But each element supports the next. We need the water to support the light, the illumination, the new beginnings, to bring us to the end of a chapter, to open us up to something new. When we reach Sagittarius season and even the Sagittarius new moon, we're starting to get to that last quarter of the astrological year. Sagittarius is the ninth sign, and that brings us, Sagittarius, ninth, Capricorn, 10th, Aquarius, 11th, and even Pisces, 12th, the last sign. And then it starts all over again. And when the sun moves into Aries, which is the spring equinox in the northern hemisphere, it is the restart of the astrological year. Just a different way to look at time. And this is just your friendly reminder that astrology is about time, how we live time, the seasons of life, metaphoric time. And when we reach Sagittarius, we are living time through the lens of a sign that wants us to look outside of ourselves. Sagittarius is the vision of our lives, the vision of the world. It is not the light, personal light. It's not the light of the sun, it's the light of the stars. And Sagittarius is the archer, and metaphorically speaking, it is a sign where we want to shoot our arrows towards their target. It sort of helps us to connect to these bigger ideas of desire and motivation and inspiration. So before I go too long, just to reintroduce myself, my name is Katie Sweetman, and I'm an astrologer and psychic medium located here presently in the rolling hills of Central Maryland. And every week we gather live to look at the astrology, and you hear me say every week, the astrology is 50%. You are the other 50%. It's just to be a participant in the time of your life. Of course, there are things that are bigger than us. Of course, there are movements of the planets that sort of bring up things in us that we didn't even realize was there. It's like, it doesn't always feel like it's 50%, Katie, but that's part of the work, is to really be more in that natural ebb and flow of the astrology. And speaking of ebb and flow this week, and I do want to come back to Sagittarius and the importance of mutable signs, but I will say this: we are in Mercury retrograde. Don't worry, it's not the end of the world. It's just part of the ebb and flow of astrology and the planets. We also will have Mars retrograde starting at the 6th. So that's Friday, December 6th. Again, part of the ebb and flow of the skies. And then even Neptune will turn direct on the 7th. It'll turn direct in Pisces. Again, part of the ebb and flow of the skies. But Neptune is different than Mars and Mercury, because Mars and Mercury are something called personal planets. It is about how I speak, I communicate, I listen, I learn. Mercury. Or it's about how I take action, what I want, going after, my desires. Mars. So we have our own personal relationships with these energies and these archetypes. And the retrograde gives us a time to bring more awareness, to bring more consciousness to how we use these planets. Neptune, on the other hand, and I will come back to this, Neptune is an evolutionary planet, so its work is a little bit differently than personal planets. It talks about a need for an evolutionary process. By the way, Neptune has been in Pisces since 2011, 2012, fully in Pisces since February 3rd, 2012. That's a long time. And we're going to start seeing some big shifts next year with Neptune and even some other planets. So let's go back to Sagittarius and also the importance of the mutable signs. There's just a lot happening in the mutable signs. And I know that this might be a little bit of a technical point, but in astrology, there are different categories of sign. We have our cardinal signs. These are the four signs of the four seasons. They align with the four seasons. They initiate new beginnings. We have the fixed signs, and the fixed signs are kind of exactly as they sound. It's like about keeping things fixed and grounded. It talks about our manifested and material world. You sort of want things stable and fixed. Then we have the mutable signs: Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. These are the four signs that help us to understand our world. They are what I call the cross of knowledge and wisdom. And without them, to whatever degree, we wouldn't have curiosity. We wouldn't have discovery. We wouldn't want to learn. I mean, of course, you could say, well, I have education. Hopefully, you have, sort of a basic education. And then, of course, we can continue to educate ourselves. We can get a formal education, should we be so lucky. But education gets into these bigger concepts. How do I discover the world? How do I discover who I am? These sort of bigger questions, actually existential questions. And so Sagittarius, as I was saying in the introduction, it's part of the last sort of this last quadrant of the last signs of the zodiac. It's not personal. It's something bigger than me. And we all have our own relationship with Sagittarius as a sign and archetype. Maybe you don't want curiosity. Maybe you don't want to grow. And maybe I'm just being silly, because Sagittarius isn't just travel or people who love to travel. And sometimes we look at astrology through the lens of personality types. But I think it's way more complicated than that, because Sagittarius as an archetype, regardless of where Sagittarius is in our own astrology, where Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius, or the role of what's called the ninth house or the ninth sign in our astrology. Without it, we wouldn't look beyond. And that's why Sagittarius is the sign of travel, exploration, journeys, discovery, adventure, religion, faith, philosophy, truth, lawyers, right and wrong. Of course, there's all different expressions of this energy, but we have it inside of us. Maybe we have a sense of right and wrong, even if it's maybe not right, or maybe it's not wrong. We have our own experience with travel and exploration. Maybe we have a degree. Maybe we don't. Maybe we don't need a degree. Maybe we're deeply philosophical. Maybe you are listening to me because you're trying to make sense out of life. Me too, because we're all human beings. And so there is this commonality of where we realize that we're all sort of part of something greater. That's the sort of the inspiration, and even I would say the majesty of Jupiter as a planet and Sagittarius as a fire sign. So this Sagittarius season, we have Jupiter in Gemini. So there is this pull of the season over to Gemini. And Gemini and Sag, these are two mutable signs, as we heard a few moments ago. But there is this dynamic opposition between a sign, Sagittarius, that typically has a sense of, this is the way I see the world. This is true for me. Of course, there are two sides to every sign. Sagittarius' shadow side is when it thinks it has all the answers, when it thinks it's right. And my joke about Sagittarius is that 99% of the time, Sagittarius is right. It's just that 1% that gets Sag every time. And if you are a Sag, maybe you know exactly what I'm talking about. So with the Jupiter in Gemini, for all of us, there is this pull throughout December. I have to remember what month it is. There's this pull throughout December to gain new perspective, to question, to travel, to move, to explore, to not just take things on face value. I need to sort of go to the source material. I need to read up on it. For example, both these signs in their own way are very chatty. Maybe we're chatty as a result. Maybe we're thinking of greener pastures. Maybe we're sharing our opinions. Certainly that is part of the Sagittarius archetype. And something this gets into a little bit more of a philosophical and even esoteric look at astrology. Is one of the reasons I love astrology is that there's just so much to teach us about life and how to hopefully live life and be good human beings, because the zodiac is the wheel of life. We start with Aries, which is the beginning, which is the first breath of life, all the way to Pisces, the end of the zodiac. Pisces, as the finality of the zodiac, and it's a mutable sign, says that what the finality of life is to gain wisdom and knowledge. Pisces and Sagittarius are both ruled by Jupiter, meaning these are two signs that talk about the external search for truth and meaning, Sagittarius, and the internal search for truth and meaning, Pisces. So here we are in the season that's trying to get us to grow and to expand our horizons, and maybe even to literally travel or to write or to publish or to tell stories. But there's this other story, no pun intended, there's this other story that's happening simultaneously, because we have Saturn in Pisces, we have Neptune in Pisces. Even next year, we're going to have the nodes moving into Pisces and by extension Virgo. And Pisces is getting a lot of airtime, whether we realize it or not. So this is a season that pulls also upon Saturn and Pisces. What do we believe in? What do we stand for? What do we think is true? And I mean this more on a personal level, not necessarily a collective level, of course, so we can look at it that way. But Pisces, because it is a water sign, water is the last element of the zodiac. Of all the elements, water helps us to bring meaning and fulfillment, to feel fulfilled, to feel like our cup is being filled, so to speak. And it's one of the reasons why we can travel the world. We can, then Sagittarius, we can be wealthy, powerful, and maybe even prominent, Capricorn. We can be well known. We can get involved in community and social issues, Aquarius. But the last sign of the zodiac is still Pisces. It's just an interesting lens in which we can look at this season, because there is this push and pull, not just between Sagittarius and Gemini, but also between Sagittarius, Gemini, and Pisces. It gives an existential and even spiritual undertone to some of our experiences. Maybe not an undertone, maybe it's an overtone for you. And to use this season, as busy as it may be, of course, it's the end of the year, typically when there's a lot going on. But where do you make time for Pisces? Because wherever Saturn is, one, we're learning a lesson. We have work to do. We maybe even have karma with that sign. We are building a deeper understanding. We need to invest time and commitment into trying to answer bigger questions. And maybe these are questions that we'll never be able to answer, but that is part of the quest. Jupiter, Sagittarius, ultimately Pisces, is to try to arrive to the best that we can to those answers, because at some point we will leave this life. I'm being a Scorpio for a moment. We will leave this life. We will leave through Pisces and go to someplace else beyond, and we will look back and wonder, what have I created? I mean wonder, not wonder question mark, but maybe to wonder, look at what I've created. So again, a little bit of a different look at Sagittarius. Of course, likes to speak, likes to share, likes to pontificate, likes to travel. These are personality traits of Sagittarius in general, not full stop, but it is a season for us to start to think bigger, to think outside ourselves, to think of the world, maybe to travel, maybe to plan a trip, for example. And just another reminder is that the mutable signs are going to have, they're presently a lot going on in the mutable signs. And even in 2025 and 6, we will have eclipses in Pisces and Virgo. So these sort of bigger philosophical, existential, and deeper questions are going to come up front and center in the new year and even beyond. The other thing to look at is that this week, and this is something that was very present in the energies of the new moon on December 1st, the new moon was at 9 degrees of Sagittarius, and that new moon was square Saturn. So this week we do have the Sun-Saturn square on December 4th, and so we have this Saturn overlay of our experiences this week. Again, with the deeper questions, I know you're like, oh, I don't know what the deeper questions, but Saturn marks our lives. Saturn marks the time of our lives and the milestones of our lives. It's typically an energy. We feel it because we need to do the right thing. We're getting older. We need to set an example. Maybe somebody is happy to tell us we're not doing the right thing. That's the other side of Saturn. But with Saturn, with the support of positive Saturn, we build our lives. It becomes solid, for example. And so that energy is really present this week, especially around the 4th of December. I would say even into the 5th and 6th, because Mercury is also square Saturn. That's the other thing. Mercury is retrograde, and it's not the end of the world again. But throughout Mercury's 3-week retrograde, if I'm remembering that correctly, it is square Saturn. Mercury, personal planet. How do I think? How do I listen? How do I learn? How do I choose? How do I weigh my options? And so there is something throughout this Mercury retrograde period that goes into December 15th and beyond. The Mercury turns direct on December 15th. I say beyond, but because, of course, of the shadow. Mercury is square Saturn, so we have decisions to make, choices to make, options to weigh. We need to be more accountable. We need to speak with authority. We need to take more understanding of what we're saying, how we're speaking, and how we're communicating. We'll all feel this in our own way. And so just sort of listen for, what is being asked of you this week? How are you being asked to take on more responsibility or to follow through or to show up, for example? And if you're navigating something or you're waiting for news and information, you may need to sort of wait till the end of the retrograde to see how it's playing out. Mercury does turn direct on, December 15th. Blanking on the degree. I think it's 6 degrees of Sagittarius, but it's the same day as the Gemini full moon. So something is going to be revealed. There's information to be shared. There are decisions to make that will present itself in your own way, in your own life, in its own way. It's just for you to sort of follow the story. Mercury retrograde, there's that. I did allude also earlier that we're having Mars retrograde starting the 6th of December. Mars retrograde, I personally feel, is something that's more to pay attention to. It doesn't happen as often as Mercury retrograde. It's, again, not the end of the world. It's just, what's a retrograde? And as a side note, I got this email from a reporter asking me Mercury retrograde questions. This is more like a clickbait website. It's not like a major newspaper or media outlet. But I felt compelled to respond because I need to do my duty and teach everybody about Mercury retrograde, and that's not the end of the world. Even if things do get screwy, it happens. But Mercury retrograde, or any retrograde, is when a planet appears to go backwards. It's not really going backwards. It's an optical illusion because the planet it's like if you could see it going around the sun, it's starting this sort of period where it's going to go behind the sun in its orbit. So all planets, except for the sun and the moon, appear to turn retrograde. It looks like the planet is beginning to go backwards in the sky, even though it's an optical illusion. If you look in the sky around this time, maybe more later, just like in a couple hours, you will see Mars in the east rising. Mars is a bit bright at the moment because as it stations retrograde or stations direct, it gets brighter. You see that the redness that Mars is famous for because it is literally a red planet. But retrogrades hint at the duality of life, the ebb and the flow, the yin and the yang. Direct motion is yang energy. Retrograde motion is yin, receptive energy. It is not gender, but it is energetically the masculine and the feminine. And so this is a period for us to tap into the yin, the subtle, the intuitive, to go back to the past, to rework something. And then we go into the yang, active phase. The planets are mostly active. There's these periods, except for the outer planets, where it's about 5 months out of the year where they are retrograde because they're so far away. So we have Mars turning retrograde, and Mars talks about desire, our ability to take action and to move forward and to go after what we want, to set our eyes on a target. It is to have courage and bravery. Each and every one of you has your own relationships with each one of those words. Meaning, what is your relationship with action? What is your relationship with your own desires and being able to go after what you want and to reach your target? For example, are you courageous and brave or not? These are just questions. And so with the retrograde, Mars gives us a chance to, or we get this opportunity to reflect and to look at and sometimes make a necessary change around some of these words. For example, Mars will be retrograde until February 23rd. That is a long time. During its retrograde, and this happens every 2 years, the last time we had Mars retrograde was August of 2022 to March of 2023. I'm saying this as a Scorpio. I am Mars ruled. I find Mars retrograde a little bit annoying, but I'm saying that as a human being. And it just means that we can't push, hit the gas. We have to be deliberate. We have to, make sure we have everything that we need. We need to really sit with what are my desires? How am I taking action? For example, but it's a necessary process because then we learn something is revealed, we transform something. And then when Mars goes direct at the end of February and then reaches the end of its retrograde cycle at the beginning of May, we're somehow changed. Especially because Mars will turn retrograde and it will make 2 more out of a series of 3 oppositions to Pluto. If you recall, there was an opposition between Pluto and Mars on November 3rd, although it was between Capricorn and Cancer. The next 2 oppositions will be between Leo and Aquarius, because Pluto is now Aquarius. Mars and Pluto can be very powerful. You see it in the charts of athletes, but it also talks about this need to transform, reform, or even transmute how we're using our Mars. These are just, again, questions or sort of seeds for deeper reflection, maybe a journal entry, for example. But that's Mars retrograde, I think, is more key to look at. And maybe having Mars retrogrades kind of pumps the brakes necessarily as we hit all that really fast and hot Gemini and Sagittarius energy, at least until Capricorn season. We do have Neptune turning direct. This will be on the 7th at 27 degrees of Pisces. Neptune, as I was saying earlier, it has been in Pisces since 2011 and 2012. Yes, you heard that correctly. 27 degrees means that we are nearing the end of Neptune's time in Pisces. In 2025, Neptune will begin its change to go into Aries. In fact, in 2025, we have, if we count Pluto, even though Pluto is November of 2024, but if you count it, that's 3 outer planets all changing signs right around each other. Pluto left Capricorn after 16 years. Now it's in Aquarius, where it will be for 20 years. We have Neptune going into Aries at the end of March of 2025, mind you, just for a short bit. Then we have Uranus going into Gemini, and this will be in July from September because there will be like a preview period. And Uranus has been in Taurus, the sign before, since 2018, 2019. Neptune, again, has been in Pisces since 2012 and 2011 and 2012. So these are big cycles that are beginning to come to an end. Also in 2025, Saturn will make its first arrival into Aries from the end of May to the beginning of September. So that's 4 planets, including Pluto, for smushing Pluto into 2025. Jupiter always, every year it changes signs, but that is 5 sort of outer planets, and Jupiter and Saturn are what I call the more like collected planets. It's a lot of change. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. Astrology is about time and looking at the clock and watching different hands move from different parts, from 1 hour to the next, from one symbolic hour to the next. So in 2025, we have these planets all changing signs. That's rare. I got to be honest. I haven't quite, gone down the rabbit hole research, but I'm sure there's maybe another time in history, but that doesn't happen very often. So we can deduce that we're sort of shifting into some sort of new era. I realize that's a big statement. We will see, but the sort of the collective and personal hour, it's already starting because of Pluto's in Aquarius, but it's beginning to change. In fact, I'm doing a webinar on December 17th, Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. You can watch live with me. I will go through the astrology of 2025. What does it mean for these planets to change signs? What are the bigger trends for 2025? And then, of course, what does it mean for you? And then you can, of course, watch the replay if you can't listen to the live presentation. So go to the show notes. You can go to my website, empoweringastrology.com. You can register to get the webinar. And we got lots to talk about in that webinar, much like today. We got lots to talk about. So having said all that, I will say Venus does go into Aquarius on this weekend, but I'm gonna bump that into next week because we just had so much to talk about with these retrogrades and these direct motions and these planets. So let's look at each of the 12 zodiac signs. Just your friendly reminder to listen for your sun and rising. It's just 2 different perspectives on your life. The sun perspective is more from the perspective of self. It's a smaller perspective. Sometimes it's an important perspective. And then your rising sign gives a much broader perspective. So let's start with Aries. Aries, so Mars is your planet and it's about to turn retrograde. So let's rewind for a little bit because Mars, as of, I forget what date it was in November, it's been in Leo. So you get a double dose of fire. Leo for you is about the expression of self. Your passions, your desires, your creativity. How do you express who you are? What do you do for fun? What lights you up and gives you joy? With the retrograde, there's this deeper work that's happening into 2025 because Mars will be retrograde until February 23rd. So from December 6th, 2024 till February 23rd, 2025. It doesn't mean that your life is on hold. I just say go back and look at that August of 2022 to March of 2023 period. That was the last Mars retrograde, but it's a time for work. It could be a work on your relationship with your desires, being able to express who you really are, your talents, your gifts, your abilities. And because Mars will go back into Cancer, I think it's the 6th of January, you are revisiting a space in your personal astrology that's about home, family, roots, foundation. Mars is going back and forth in a place in the sky that takes you symbolically back to events in November, or maybe deeper because different cycles, but that's sort of the path that you are retracing throughout this retrograde period. The basic concept is that during a retrograde, we're not hitting the gas pedal. We are needing to go inward, to reflect, to recuperate, to consult our intuition, to look into parts of ourselves that we're not typically consciously in touch with. So there's Mars retrograde. I will also say that with energies very present this week with Mercury and Saturn is still in your 12th. You're still in this sort of wrapping up this big phase and cycle of your life that even takes you back 30 years, and trying to be very conscientious about what you're bringing with you into this new life that has its beginnings in 2025, and also what are you leaving behind. With Mercury square Saturn this week, it is to be very conscientious about what you are bringing with you and what you are leaving behind. Saturn doesn't go into Aries, your sign, until May 24th of next year, from May 24th till September 1st. And that's the preview of something. But I think the seeds are being planted now. So again, to use this time, especially as we come to the end of the year, to be very conscientious. And also to think about your relationship with choice, the things you're communicating, and how you're weighing your options, and where you're investing your time, for example. What else is going on? We do have that recent Sagittarius new moon, this sort of period over the next 4 weeks that's about faith and truth and meaning and travel, what you believe in and what you stand for. And with Jupiter sort of in this sort of crossroads with Mercury and Saturn, it may be a big time for you, but on a level that's more it's not your material life. It's more about your inner life and more about the things that are important to you, and trying to get more clear about what do you believe in and what do you stand for. Taurus, Venus is your planet, and it's coming to the end of Capricorn this week. It's going to go into Aquarius on the 7th of December. But this week is for you to wrap up this sort of chapter that's been about what do you believe in, what do you stand for, and what do you think is true. Very similar to some of the themes that are very much present with this Sagittarius new moon. But the difference is Taurus is that the Sagittarius new moon that we had yesterday, December 1st, is really picking into deeper emotional spaces. What do you believe in? What do you think is true? It needs to be born out of a space where maybe you needed to do some inner work, some inner confrontation. That's the thing about life. When we don't look within, we don't grow. And that's sort of in that space that you've been, where your astrology is right now, the past few weeks and even into the next few weeks. Venus changing signs is the change of a personal hour. Venus is now going to go into something called your 10th sign. We'll talk more about this next week, but the 10th is about your career. This will take you essentially into the new year. Venus going into Aquarius means that next week, we'll talk about this more, Venus is going to meet up with Pluto. You, and this is fodder for a much bigger conversation, but you are in a period, Taurus, of the start of a major change in either in your professional life, your relationship with duty and responsibility, your relationship with your career. It's going to be different for every Taurus, but this is sort of building upon these bigger changes that I think even were set in motion way back in 2018, 2019 when Uranus first went into Taurus. That said, the Mars retrograde, Mars is turning retrograde in something called your, gotta do the math, Katie, turning retrograde in something called your 4th sign. There's going to be a lot of focus into the new year on your home environment, whether that's literally where you live or that's more of an emotional statement, like where's home, who is home, needing to focus on family, and needing, I would think, on some level to find the balance between your outer life, professional life, external duties and responsibilities, and also your inner needs and wants. See what bigger emotions are sort of bubbling to the surface as Mars turns retrograde. Mars will also return to a space in your chart that talks about voice and communication and education and travel. But that said, where a lot of the focus is happening in the moment is emotional, especially with the energies of the Sag new moon. And this might get even into things about family in the past and memory and parents and ancestors. So really sit with what's coming up, because maybe this is a release for you that helps you as part of this bigger transformation that you are in right now, Taurus. Gemini, so Mercury is your planet and it's making a square to Saturn this week. So let's rewind for a second. Mercury is retrograde. It's been retrograde, goodness, since the end of November, and it's in Sagittarius at the moment. So where the energy of your sign is being pointed towards is career. Is that right? Yes, it is. So your career sign is Sagittarius. So there's a big focus on one hand, for some of you, it actually literally may be career. It could be about something going on in your professional life, something going on in your work environment, or even these bigger questions about what do I want in the world? Like, how am I going after my ambitions, for example? For some of you, it's more about responsibility, a need to grow and to mature your life and to step into a role that is either being asked of you or a role that you've been working towards. With Mercury square Saturn this week, it's pulling, Sagittarius is not your career sign. I didn't think that was right. Sagittarius is your relationship sign. I'm so sorry, Sag. That's the thing. Sometimes you have to do all the math in your head. So let's little take two. So Mercury is your planet. It's in your relationship sign. You got another thing in your career sign. That's Saturn. But that said, the big focus at the moment is relationships, how you connect with people, how do you communicate, how do you interact. It is digging into these bigger themes about wants and needs and desires. It is a very dynamic time in your personal astrology, Gemini. You got Jupiter in your sign, you got Saturn in your career sign, see I did it right, and you also of course have Mercury retrograde in your relationship sign. That literally may translate as old relationships coming in, romantic or otherwise, or a need to reconsider, recalibrate the people that you are connecting and interacting with. Saturn is in your career sign. Saturn will be here until 2026, but it's important for you to understand, Gemini, that you're in a period of your life where you're being asked kind of some simple questions. What do I want to be when I grow up? What's the role that I want to play in the world? And with relationships, maybe it's a need to collaborate. Maybe it's a need to look at sort of the partnerships in your life and how everything is supporting something bigger in your life. But with the Sagittarius new moon, this is a period, the next 4 weeks, that is putting a lot of emphasis on relationships. So it could be a busy time, a social time, a time to renew a relationship, an existing relationship, or something for somebody new to come in. I know sometimes there's this little fear if a relationship begins in a Mercury retrograde that it's not going to stick. It just means that there's something for you to go back and look at, regardless of how the relationship lasts. But that said, Mercury, your planet, is square Saturn this week, even into next week. So this is a time for you to take your options and your choices very seriously. Cancer. So the moon is your planet, and this week it is traveling between Sagittarius and Pisces. So for you, Cancer, Sagittarius is your 6th sign. It's health, it's wellness. You just had a Sagittarius new moon. So on a very practical level, this could be a period as you go into the end of the year, you need to focus on your physical life. Taking care of your body, looking at health and wellness, really creating a sense of order and structure, maybe even cleaning things out. Moon will go from Capricorn, which is relationships. It moves into Capricorn later today, Monday, Tuesday, I think parts of Wednesday, it's still in Capricorn. Relationships, Thursday, it goes into, goodness, what's under Capricorn, Aquarius. And by the weekend, it's in Pisces. Pisces is a big focus in your astrology at the moment. We've been talking about it. You're sort of in this bigger, broader time in your life where it's about, for some of you, schooling, education. For some, it's travel, but it's getting into these bigger questions. What do I believe in? What do I stand for? How am I sharing my wisdom, my knowledge? Am I publishing? Am I teaching? Am I searching? Am I trying to find something, for example? With the Sagittarius new moon, with Mercury retrograde square Saturn, this might be a week to really make some decisions, to weigh your options, to see things from a different point of view, to maybe reevaluate your day-to-day life and how things are organized and structured, and how you even take care of yourself. Then there's the Mars retrograde. Mars turns retrograde in something called your second sign: money, income, material stability, and security. When Mars is in this space, it's very motivated. It has a lot of desire for material stability and security. That may translate as more spending. That may translate as gathering resources, really feeling like you have more material things at hand. Or maybe it's something deeper. Maybe it's self-worth and value. Mars is a career planet, so this actually might tick into income, whether it's how you earn a living, and maybe even these bigger questions of how you are earning a living. Mars turning retrograde, because it is a career planet, this may play out in career, or if it's not career, it's your sense of responsibilities and duties in the world. Where do I want to go? What do I want to be when I grow up? How do I want to create a stable material life? Or what's my value and worth? Do I feel valued and of worth in my professional life? Or do I feel of value and of worth in the world? It's for you to see how this is showing up in your astrology. I will say, because Mars is opposite Pluto, even into the new year, something is really playing out about power, control, and needing to transform something. And this may be showing up, at least in a professional life, with themes around power and control with a boss, or maybe you are the boss and you're looking at power and control. And again, it's sort of looking to these bigger questions about value and worth, for example. But it may mean that something is really transforming or needs to transform in your professional life as you even go into the next few months of the new year. Leo, so the sun is your planet. When the sun is in Sagittarius, you have reached something called your fifth sign. This is the season to play, to create, to express, to have fun, to reconnect and even reignite the passions and the joys and the desires within. This could be a season for you to take yourself and to take your talents seriously. Speaking of the self, Mars is just about to turn retrograde in Leo. Hey, you are a Leo. Typically when Mars is in the first, whether it's your sign as a Leo or your first house because you're Leo rising, this is a Mars that has a lot of, it's like a sense of self, a sense of desire, and a sense of want. Like it knows exactly what it wants typically. And the retrograde is going to be different for everybody, but this is a time for you to find your power, to find your own 2 feet, to reconnect to your desires, especially because it's Sag season. Maybe you are connected to your desires. So how do you sort of express it even more? Maybe you feel very divorced from your desires, your needs, and your wants. That's part of this retrograde period for you. Mars is also a planet that rules home and family and the household. And so maybe this gets into these deeper themes about family in the past, maybe ancestors, maybe you were taught a certain way to be a certain way. And the Mars retrograde gives you a chance to look at it from a different angle. I will say that Mars will go into the 12th on the 6th of January. So you start almost the new year needing to go back to something, needing to go within, needing to rest and recuperate. And that will even take you into the beginning of March. So use this time where Mars is very prominent in your astrology to sort of, again, find your footing and stand on your own 2 feet. But I will say, because Mars is making that opposition to Pluto well into 2025, that there's something about relationships that may be very present at the moment. And really, whatever it is about desire and need and want and power and standing on your own 2 feet or having your own individuality might be also playing out with somebody else in a relationship. And that might be how the opposition is showing up for you. Opposition is not opposing always, but it is a need to find some sort of equilibrium between you and somebody else, or you and relationships in general. What else is going on? So we do have Mercury square Saturn this week. So this might be a week that, this is the thing, you do have Saturn in the 8th, especially into 2026. And it's bringing up maybe a lot of deep emotions and material. And that's something for you to weigh, something for you to gain a different point of view. Maybe you need to rest and meditate in the midst of all this fiery energy. But don't forget about your wants, your needs, and your desires. Virgo. Virgo, so Mercury is your planet, and Mercury is retrograde at the moment. It will be retrograde until December 15th. Right now, it's retrograde in something called your 4th sign: home, family, roots, foundation. I realize we're in the season where home and family is very prominent, so certainly that might be showing up in your experiences right now. We just had the Sagittarius new moon as of yesterday, December 1st, in this part of your chart. Some Virgos may be planning a move or planning a change in their household. A change in the household could mean I need to remodel, redecorate, I need to clean things out. It could also mean somebody's moving in, somebody's moving out. Maybe you want to start a family, for example. Keep in mind that Mercury is square Saturn. And this says that there is something going on between you and another person. If it's not literally another person, it just could be relationships as a whole, because you have had Saturn in your relationship sign since March of 2023. That could mean that you are in a period of taking relationships more seriously, building a life with another person, saying yes to a person, saying no to a person, or if it doesn't mean about romantic relationships, getting very clear about the type of people you want in your life. Mercury square Saturn says that you've got some decisions to make. And here's the thing about the retrograde is that it's still playing out into, I think, past the 15th. We will have a Gemini full moon on the 15th. Gemini is something called your career sign. This could put the spotlight on your professional life, your responsibilities, your public life, maybe even recognition, for example. But I think when you start to look at all these different energies, it's a time to get your life like more structured, more organized. That makes sense. Whether you need to really spend some time with family or spend some time in your home, whether you need to sort things out with another person or figure out what the role of relationships in your life, whether you're trying to do the dance between your public life and your public responsibilities, your professional responsibilities, and also needing to make sure that you're getting your needs met, for example. Then there's the Mars retrograde. Mars is turning retrograde in your 12th. Just a little bit of a vibe check for you, Virgo. Like, how's your energy? Do you feel tired? Do you feel like you need to do more rest right now? Because typically the 12th is a space where Mars doesn't have a lot of energy. It's because the energy of Mars is being put outside of out of this world. The 12th represents the world that we can't see. It is it's our dreams, it's our spirituality, it's our need to recoup, for example. And so it's just to use Mars to take that energy and put it towards the things that are actually going to fulfill you, or maybe just need to take a rest. Libra, so Venus is your planet. It's wrapping up its time in Capricorn this week, and that is your sign of home and family. So this has just been the natural time in your personal astrology to prioritize your home environment, to spend more time at home, maybe even to spend more time with family. I think even with Saturn in your 6th, maybe you needed to have more duties and responsibilities within the household to clean things out, or even duties and responsibilities to a family member, for example. Sag season for you is a season to focus on writing, speaking, communication, travel, exploration, ideas, information. It's a busy time in general for you. But with Venus beginning to leave the 4th, Venus does go into what's called your 5th on the 7th of December. And this will take you into the new year. And the 5th says this is a time for you to reconnect with your desires, your needs, your wants, your talents, your gifts, your abilities. And this kind of gives you that punch of air energy. Libra is an air sign. It needs new visions. It needs communication. It needs exploration. It can't necessarily sit still. So I would say, especially with that Sag new moon, like use this period to connect with your creative abilities, your creative desires. If you're a writer, if you're a singer, if you're a speaker, of course, that's not all Libras, but this is a time for you to really find your voice and even to find your creative voice. That said, Mars retrograde, Mars is turning retrograde in something called your 11th. The 11th is friends, community, society, humanities, social issues, social causes, your sense of justice, fairness, and equity. See what's happening in your life. Is it about friends? This is retrograde about friends. Is it about community? Is it about your sense of belonging? Is it about bigger social issues and social causes? Is it about the world? So Mars retrograde, Mars will go back to your career sign at the start of the year. But it's for you to look for what is the bigger theme that's coming up. Is the question, do I have the ability to be myself in the world? And I think with Mars opposing Pluto into the new year, there might be this, sort of tension that's happening between the self and individuality and who you are versus the greater whole. Maybe that's not the case for you, but see how it's related to you. Mars is also a relationship sign, so this may be playing out with a partner or within a significant relationship in your life, or maybe even a friendship. Mars and Pluto in opposition says that something needs to change and transform. It's for you to see how that is relevant in your life. But I think, again, with this energy, the Sag new moon, this energy that's Venus going into the 5th, this is a time for you also to get very clear about who you are and to reconnect with your desires, your wants, and your needs. And don't be afraid to share that with the world. Scorpio. So Mars is your planet and it's turning retrograde. So think back to, let's say, August of 2022 to March of 2023. That was the last time that Mars was retrograde. It happens every 2 years. So here we are. That's kind of crazy that it's been 2 years. But so where is Mars right now for you? It's in Leo, which is your career sign. Leo represents your most public part of your chart, so it could be your public reputation, your public life. It's also professional life, your career, but it's also your duties and responsibilities in the world. So Mars in Leo, and it will be in Leo until January 6th. It will return to Leo. I forget when. I think it's in April. But this is a time where you are at your most public. You're sort of reaching out into the world. And I think on some level, Mars turning retrograde is asking you, what's your desires? What are your needs? What do you want to be in the world? Like, who do you want to be when you grow up? And it's to reconnect with that really fundamental. It doesn't have to be about career per se, but I think even when at a young age, we have this sense of like, who do I want to grow up into? And maybe there were kind of silly answers when we were 5 years old. We wanted to be a princess, or apparently I asked my mom this question. And she's like, I was like, Mom, when I was a little kid, what did I want to say I wanted to be? And she said a garbage man. But I think that was just the Scorpio in me. But anyway, it's to kind of get back to that root desire, that root want. Probably not garbage person for me, but that root desire and that root want about, what it propels you into the world. What role and function do you want to be? Mars will go back into Cancer at the start of the year, roughly. It'll be there into beginning of March. So it's more about sort of these philosophical concerns and questions. But this is your public life at the moment with the retrograde. That said, we are coming off of a Sagittarius new moon. This is a lunar month for you to focus on money, income, material stability, to reconnect to your desires to create material stability for yourself or to gather resources for yourself, and maybe even getting into these bigger questions about, what's your value, what's your worth, and especially with the Mars up in the top of your chart, it's, what's my value and worth in the world. Oh, I will add, Scorpio, is that Mars is making oppositions to Pluto into the new year. You already had your first opposition. I think this was on November 3rd. But there is this energy that's really trying to push you to make some sort of change, transformation, or even reformation as you go into next April. Sagittarius, so a lot of eyes on you at the moment. Happy birthday. You just had a new moon on the 1st of December. So if your birthday is the 1st of December, plus or minus a couple of days, it is a big new year for you. It's typically a time of new beginnings, but it's for you to see how this new moon energy is playing out over the next 12 months. That said, there's a lot going on in Sagittarius's chart at the moment. Namely, Jupiter is in Gemini. Gemini is your sign of relationships. It's a different second half of the year than it was the first half of the year, because Jupiter is now in an air sign. It's about relationships, connection. It's busy, it's chatty, it's social, it needs to travel and to explore. Typically, these are things that Sag is happy to do. Of course, every Sag is different. Also, Jupiter is square Saturn, and it's playing off of this bigger story about family, home. This has been since March of 2023. Jupiter will square Saturn later this month, but it's present in the astrology at the moment. So there is this need to really, I think, build the container of your life right now. What does that mean? It's like your life exists within a framework, and how do we make sure it's stable, it's grounded? So you might be doing a lot of work on the framework right now, and that means investing time in relationships, getting very clear about the type of relationships that you want, the role of relationships in your life. Plus, we have the Sag new moon, so it's about the new beginnings and renewals. Plus the square, Mercury is square Saturn, Jupiter is square Saturn. What's the base and foundation of your life? Where is home and who is home? And since Mercury is also a career sign, there is a lot of push on you this week about really duties and responsibilities, and even duties and responsibilities in your public life. So you're in a little bit of a crunch. And, that said, how do you make sure you are getting what you want, what you need? And maybe that's where the Mercury square Saturn is, to help you to get very clear about that. Write it out, for example. Mars retrograde. Mars is turning retrograde in something called your 9th sign. So a lot of energy on the 9th at the moment. For some Sages, that means travel, exploration, particularly long distance or foreign travel. It could also get into these bigger philosophical questions. What do I believe in? What do I stand for? And what do I think is true? Also, this is a period about, it's not just philosophical questions, but sharing your wisdom and knowledge. And for some Sages, it's about education. With Mars turning retrograde, this is a space that you will return to, because Mars will leave the 9th in the beginning of January. It returns to the 9th in I think it's April of 2025. But there is this need to sort of reevaluate. What do you believe in? What do you stand for? Is it true? Is it truly true? Is it your truth, for example? And my joke about Sag, and I said it earlier, is that 99.9% of the time, Sag is right. It's just that 0.1%. So with Mars turning retrograde, don't let that 0.1% get you. Just make sure with Mercury square Saturn, you are making sure all the information is correct. Your T's are crossed, your I's are dotted. Mercury is retrograde. Doesn't mean that life has to come to a halt, but it does mean that you need to go back and make sure that all the information is clear and organized. Capricorn. Capricorn. So Saturn is your planet. You hear me say this every week. Saturn is still in Pisces. This continues to be a broader stroke in your life that's about voice, communication, education, the choices that you're making. But again, I've said this before, Pisces is kind of a weird sign, if I'm being completely honest, for Saturn to be in. Maybe it's a weird time for you. Maybe it's not a weird time for you, but it just means that this sort of Capricornian desire for stability and structure and everything in black and white and everything spelled out is not so black and white. It's not so spelled out. It's not so clear. And maybe that's just part of the work, is to be at peace with that, is to allow yourself to be in the flow instead of that really concrete knowing of things, because Capricorn typically wants to be in control, and Pisces is inherently a sign where we are not in control. We are letting the flow of life take us. That said, speaking of the flow of life, you have reached the end of your personal calendar year because we just had the Sagittarius new moon. Sagittarius is your 12th sign, so you spend the rest of the year up until your birthday, but even into the rest of the year, because I think there's a new moon like on the 2nd or the 1st of January. But this need to really go within, to reflect, to get quiet, to recuperate, to rest, to get very clear about the things that you don't want to bring with you into your next personal year. The 12th is also a space of inner and even spiritual discovery. So it gives a little bit of a quiet overlay to what you are experiencing right now. With Jupiter square Saturn, with Mercury square Saturn this week, there is something about faith and truth and meaning. It doesn't have to be the faith of religion, but these sort of bigger questions and a need to get very clear. A need to make a choice, a need to make a commitment, a need to sort things out so that there's no confusion, for example. We also have Mars turning retrograde. Mars is turning retrograde in Leo. Leo happens to be what's called your 8th sign. The 8th sign is kind of an interesting space for Mars to be, because since November, Mars has led you into a space where it's about inner reflection, about turning the mirror onto yourself and doing a deeper work. That's the thing. My joke is like sometimes it's not I didn't invent this term, but like the call is coming from inside the building, meaning a lot of times we want to think that it's somebody else, but how is it actually us? And that's where Mars in the 8th says, maybe the call is coming from inside the building. So maybe to look at yourself and to see whatever situation is in your life, what does it reveal about you? That's the power of the 8th, to turn these sort of deeper hidden parts of ourselves into light. That's the spiritual alchemy of the 8th. For some Capricorns, it is about money, finance, assets, estates, for example. That's the other role of the 8th. And I will say in the new year, Mars will go back into your relationships sign in Cancer, so there's going to be a lot of focus on relationships in the new year. There you go. Aquarius. So Saturn is your planet, still in the 2nd, and it's still this bigger time in your life to create material stability and security for yourself. Saturn being Saturn, sometimes we need to get razor sharp about what do we need and what we don't need. For some Aquariuses, it can be a lean time. For some Aquariuses, it could be a time where you really are building material stability and security in your life. With the Pisces overlay, it continues to be a time to make sure that there is an alignment with your values, your personal values, and even your spiritual values. That said, Sagittarius season, Sagittarius is something called your 11th sign. We're coming off that Sagittarius new moon, so it's about looking towards the future. It's about community, spending more time in your community. It's with the role of friendship, and it's a busy time, especially as you come to the end of the year, and maybe to look at the role and even value of friends and community in your life right now. The 11th is also where we look outside, we look towards the future. It's to hope and dream and even to plan for the coming year. That said, Mars is turning retrograde in Leo. Leo is your relationship sign. So typically, classically speaking, traditionally speaking, when Mars is in the relationship sign, it's a busy and sometimes even there can be some conflicts, not always, but there's a, Mars is typically saying it's about the wants and needs of other people. And that can sometimes put us into a little bit of a tricky spot because we're navigating the wants and the needs and desires of other people at the moment. Mars is also making an opposition to Pluto. While we had the first opposition on November 3rd, there will be 2 more oppositions into the new year that's really talking about this bigger period of your life, about you and other people, but namely because Pluto is now in Aquarius for the next 20 years, that this is a new era in your life. It is to find your power. It is to stand on your own 2 feet in whatever way that's relevant in your life. With Mars and Leo, there might be something that's going back and forth between you and other people. But again, it is to find your power, your desire. And your relationships will continue to be a major focal point even into the next new year and even the next few months of the new year. Oh, and I will say that Venus going into Aquarius on the 7th, Venus is more of a peacemaker. Venus is more of a, let's figure out how to negotiate that. So maybe Venus will help smooth things out with Mars, but Venus is meeting up with Pluto next week. We'll talk more about this, but it is really getting to these bigger questions about power and control and even transformation. Finally, Pisces. So Jupiter is your planet. It's pulling your energy down to something called the 4th, because Jupiter's in Gemini right now, and Gemini is something called your 4th sign, home and family. I said something similar to Sagittarius and even I think to Gemini and Virgo, and I think it also applies to you. This is a time in your life, and this takes you into the new year, where it's very much about the container of your life. Like, what is your life resting in? And I realize that's a big statement. It's a little vague, maybe but it's more for something for you to reflect on. Because we have Jupiter square Saturn, and this will have the I think it's the 2nd opposition later this month, but that's happening right now. We have Mercury square Saturn this week. This is a time, especially this week, of needing to make some choices, to get serious about something, to build something, to have a conversation, to get clear about something in the home environment. Maybe you're planning to move, maybe it's not. For some Pisces, if this is even relevant, maybe it's the start of family, maybe it's about, needing to spend more time with family, or maybe your parents are older. Again, it's for you to see how this is relevant to your life. So you have this big dynamic Sagittarius new moon yesterday, the 1st, in something called your 10th sign of career. So this is a big spotlight right now in your professional life, your public life, your duties and responsibilities in the world. And for you to reconnect with your desires, your wants, your needs, find the balance between your inner life, the home life, and the professional duties and responsibilities, relationships. And you continue to have Saturn in Pisces. Saturn will be in Pisces until February of 2026. So this just continues to be this time to take the step up each week, each month, take the step up. Get more clear about the role and responsibility that you are taking in your life. Try to navigate, try to find balance, because even though Saturn can make us feel the weight of duties and responsibilities and even the weight of time, Saturn also has this other side of it where it says, don't forget to find the balance. So maybe that's what's really happening, with this opposition that's happening between the Sag new moon and Jupiter and Gemini. And, so how do you use this week to really get as focused as you can, as clear as you can about what you want and what you need? That said, speaking of desire, Mars turns retrograde in Leo, and Leo is something called your 6th sign. And Leo is a space for you to connect with health, with wellness, for you to look at rituals and practice and like the day-to-day functions of your life. So for some Pisces, it is about health and wellness. You need to return to something, and maybe with a sense of balance and needing to make some serious decisions, it's to sort of put things back in order. For some Pisces, it's to really make sure that your day-to-day life actually, it's being supported by the things that you love and that you desire. Because when it's the things that you don't love and you don't desire, it sort of takes from you. For example, for some Pisces, it's the need to clean up or to clean out, to get rid of things, of course, as we get into the new year, and to maybe even to put this Mars towards fitness and wellness, however that is good, because of course, you know your body and what's right for you. So Mars will go back to Cancer in the new year, and Cancer for you talks about, really starting off 2025, going back to the things that you love, that you desire, and that are actually going to fuel your life. So there you go. That is your look at the astrology of December 2nd through 8th, 2024. Don't forget to sign up for my 2025 webinar that I'm doing on December 17th, so you can get that first look at the year ahead, which I think is going to be a pretty interesting year, if I'm being completely honest. In the past few years, looking ahead, there's a couple of years that have always stood out where I've put a big question mark against. 2020 was one of them. 2025 is another, and 2026 is another. There's just way too many things happening in the sky, question mark, and what that sort of shift means for us personally and collectively. So the link is in the show notes, so you can go to my website, empoweringastrology.com. It's right there to learn more and to register. You can follow me on Facebook, on Instagram, on Spotify, YouTube. You can book a consultation with me, because I know, some of you are my clients and can get really into what this time means for you. I love working with people. So that is your look at the astrology of December 2nd through 8th, 2024. And we are rounding out the year, and I appreciate you all, and I will see you all next week. Bye-bye.